So if you want to trade successfully on Betfair on horse racing, you're going to have to do a number of things. And one of the first things that I do is I take a broad look at the markets that I have over the course of any one part of the day. That will help me identify races that I really want to trade and put some focus into, ones that I don't want to, but it will also give me clues as to how the market is likely to trade. You can begin to see the shape of the market just by looking at the race card. And then as we get closer to the start of the race and when the period I'm actually going to trade, then I'll begin to look at a few other characteristics. But where I start is looking at all of those races and then narrowing in on some key characteristics. And if you want to learn how to do that, then just watch the rest of this video. So there are several things that you need to look at in order to be able to trade a horse race effectively. One of the mistakes that a lot of people make is that they go in and they just try and trade every race and try and do something from it and sort of say which way the odds going and stuff like that. But my approach is much broader than that to start with. What I do is I look up and down the entire card. I'm looking for sort of easy targets, but I'm also looking for races where I'm sort of thinking, well, that's just too hard. I don't know what's going to happen in that race. I don't really have a clue. It's going to be very volatile and therefore it's going to be risky. And, you know, is that really worth trading? And I'm scanning up and down the races of the day, identifying races and the sort of general characteristics that they will exhibit. That's the primary focus that I'm going to talk about in this video, is how to do that. We're going to look at a card and we're going to identify races that are of interest and what they're likely to do. Now, when you've done that, as the day progresses, then you can sort of begin to change your opinion based upon are runners taken out of the market? Is there something that's happened in some earlier markets that could influence the later markets? And those sort of characteristics as well, and how those individual meetings are trading. And then the final step would be actually trading it and making a decision about what you're going to do when that volume arrives. So effectively, you're sort of looking at a three-step process. But the place where I always start is I look at all of the races and make some general decisions on what I'm going to trade and also what I'm not going to trade, but also how I expect those markets to behave. That allows me to take a broader view, focus in on some of the markets that I know I'm going to enjoy trading and avoid the ones that I don't think I will be able to do particularly well at. And that's exactly where you should start every day. So let's have a look at how I approach that. So before I trade every morning, I fire up Guardian, have a look at the markets and make some decisions about what I'm expecting to see. It doesn't mean that it will happen, but with my experience, it is quite likely that a market will have a certain type of characteristic. So I'm using Guardian lists here, and you can see loads of examples on the forum, but basically when you use the Guardian list, this will allow you to define how you want Guardian to look. So on this particular occasion, I've got it set up for horse racing. So when I have this in front of me, what I'm looking at is a number of different types of characteristics. I'm looking at the volume, the race type, the price of the favourite, how many runners there are, if a jockey is running or has the favourite in a number of different races. These are all little clues that you can use to understand exactly what is going on. So what I will do is point out a few things to you on here and tell you what I see based upon all of my years in the market. And one of the first things that I can see in here when we look up and down this list is this nursery at Ascot. It's a very small field. It's only 4 runners, and if you look at all of the others, you can see a mixture of different runners in here. But I know when we look at 4-runner fields that it's going to be a very jumpy market. The prices are going to move around all over the place, and that is because the book percentage is so small, and with things like cross-matching in place, the price on something comes in somewhere here and the price will go out somewhere else, and it creates a quite jumpy market. They can be very difficult to trade, and this, you know, ratchets up the difficulty of this market. Now, because it's priced at 2s, it will probably get backed, especially in that type of race. But we can sort of, you know, assume straight away that because it's a small field, that is going to make the market, you know, quite a difficult market to read. It's going to jump around all over the place. So this race at Ascot I would grade as one of the hardest races of the day, and I may actually avoid it. It's a good way of avoiding... Oops, I've just accidentally clicked on kill again. It's actually a good way of not making a loss, is to avoid the races that you can't really interpret or you don't feel comfortable with. So yeah, when you look up and down this list, that's what you're doing. You're sort of saying, oh, I'm looking at things that are of interest or not. And one of the races of interest is the Group 1 at Newmarket. You can see we've got a number of races at Newmarket today. They are all high quality races, and the group race will give you a massive contrast between the race that we said would be quite difficult and the feature race of the day that will trade in a very predictable manner. But we can look at other things as well. So if you look at this race at Newmarket here, we can see it's a 13 runner and it's a competitive handicap. With a competitive handicap, it's going to move in a narrow traded range. So this would suit a strategy where you're actively, going in and doing orders and jumping out of the market, and you're just getting, a tick or two within these particular markets. But if we look at this novice stakes at York, the complete opposite. This market's going to trend dramatically. It's a small field. We already know the characteristics of a small field, and it's priced at 2. So you've got a novice stakes, which is going to be volatile, small field, which is going to be volatile, and something priced at 2, which is going to be volatile. It's going to move a lot. So you wouldn't go for a 1 or 2 tick gain here. You'd be trying to see and identify if you could tell where the trend is likely to be. And because it's priced at 2, it's near a crossover point, it's going to be a very interesting market. And this could, if it breaks 2 convincingly, move down fairly significantly, or it could find a bit of resistance at 2. But we would examine that as we get closer to the market. So yeah, we've got a competitive handicap, 13 runner field, very stable prices here. We've got the novice stakes, which will not be particularly stable, and we've got the group race that will exhibit different characteristics. And I would say, in fact, that the group race sort of sits in between these two markets. It will be somewhere it won't be particularly volatile, it won't be particularly stable, it will just move gently and develop a trend. And so if we sit on the back of that trend on this group race, that will define exactly how we're going. So we can tell roughly how the market's going to act. We can't sort of tell specifically what it's going to do at this stage, but we know that the feature race today is going to be trending in one direction or another. And subject to what happens in some of the prior races to that, that could define that trend for us. So we need to keep our eyes open. So we're looking at a broad level here, and as we get closer and closer to the race, we'll make more and more decisions based upon what we think is likely to happen. But taking this broad look at the card will tell us sort of how the markets are likely to behave. We've identified 3 different races there with 3 very different characteristics, and that will define how the market feels to us and how we are likely to trade it. But we can only make specific sort of decisions when we get much, much closer to the start of that race. But yeah, looking up and down the card will give us all of that sort of knowledge, allow us to look at things, identify races. So there's a maiden here, this will be volatile, 12 runner field, it's going to behave a little bit less jumpy than the small field race, but because it's priced at 2 and it's a maiden, that will be another race that will move a fair bit. But yeah, we can tell all of this information just by looking at the card. So other things you can look at as well are things like the volume. If you click on the volume header, you can see it's sorted by volume. You can see there's nothing at Cork. But if we click it again, it'll sort it in reverse order. And you can see all the focus on this particular day is at Newmarket. That is where most of the money is getting matched. That is where you're going to stand the best chance of making money. And if you sort it by course, you can also have a comparison of which courses are busy and which ones aren't. So if I scroll down a little bit here, you can see there's plenty of money at Newmarket, quite a lot of money at York, and less money at some of the other courses as well. So Ascot is trading a little bit less. So you can see where the focus is and where a lot of the money is within each of those individual races and the courses. That will bring your attention to it. But also you can see we've got jockey and trainers here as well. So you can see Andrew Balding has a number of runners at Chester. That could lead to a little bit of a gamble developing there if some of the early runners. So you can see he's basically got the favourites at those, and that's why we're interested. But we can also look at the jockey and see if they've got any favourites lined up as well. So we can see here Jason Watson again with Andrew Balding at Chester. So that immediately brings your attention there, saying I should pay a little bit more attention to Chester today if that first one goes in. Because that may set off a bit of a gamble. But you can do these sort of interesting things with Guardian by putting these additional features within there. So it's always pretty helpful to do that sort of stuff. So there's something else interesting in here as well, and that is that if we look at this Group 2 race, it's at a very, very short price. It's heavy odds on. And one of the weird things that happens when you get a high quality race at a very short price is if a little bit of support comes for it, then that tends to snowball. You tend to see
that continues to receive a lot of money. Now, you can't say it's definitely going to be backed, but when you start to see those signs that it's beginning to be backed, it will very often snowball. And that just seems to be simply a fact of that it's a big race, there's lots of opinion on it, and then people sort of tend to follow that opinion. And if that opinion is pulling the price in, then that tends to snowball. So this is an interesting race, and I would look at this and sort of say, I think I know what's going to happen on this race. And then it would just be a case of turning up at the beginning of where the volume is and just seeing exactly what happens and then jumping on the back of that trend. Yeah, so this looks like one of the easier markets to trade.
So I've taken sort of quite a broad view on some of the races that you look at here, and that is because that's all you can do when you're that far out, because things can change between you first look at the markets and when you actively trade them. But as the day progresses, I'm constantly looking at all of these things to see what's in front of me and how I should be looking at that race. When do I want to join it, and what's the sort of thing that I'm likely going to do? I don't use one strategy and then try and apply it across all of the markets. I'm chopping and changing strategy as I go through the day. However, it may be that one style of trading suits you better than another, or you're good at one style of trading than another. And therefore you should be looking at that card and saying, where are those races? Where can I deploy this strategy successfully? And if you don't know what that strategy is or races that you prefer, actively trade all of the races, make some notes, and then identify characteristics and things that you like and that you don't like. And eventually a pattern will emerge of things that you're good at, and then you can use that to start looking at the card. This is how I started approaching this. And this is why I can look at that card and give you those sort of characteristics, because you do see repeating patterns. For example, lower quality races tend to have a lot more price movement than higher quality races. So I know on much higher quality races, for example, a Group 1 race, I can use larger stakes and I can be more confident that the market won't suddenly turn and go against me. However, if we have a small field race that could be a maiden or a novice, where the odds are around 2, and it is low quality, that is going to be a pretty crazy market. So I know one thing I can definitely not do is go in there and try and nick a few ticks, because I could get that right many times, but when it goes wrong, it will go badly wrong against me. So I'm not going to deploy a strategy in that market like gaining 1 or 2 ticks. And in fact, I may avoid that market altogether if I think that it is too hard. But if I am going to go for those sort of small gains within a market, you know, typically what you would define as scalping or something similar to that, going for 1 tick gains, then I tend to choose competitive handicaps at bigger prices, because I know that the market is going to be fairly flat. It's going to be range bound, maybe a little bit of movement, but it will be it's sort of in one direction. It won't fly all over the place. And I know I can sort of hold a position and it's not going to be really a major issue for me. That it's not going to run massively against me. And that is what I do when I identify those cards at the beginning of the day. I'm looking up and down the list. I'm trying to identify which races have certain characteristics and therefore home in on them. And of course, as we get closer to the period where the race is about to start, then you start looking at all of the characteristics. You're looking specifically at the ladders and you're trying to identify if there's backing or laying activity within those particular markets. But when you first look at the markets, you should be able to get an idea of which markets you want to trade, which ones you don't, and what they're likely to do, because that will allow you to match a strategy to the market. And ultimately, that is your key goal when you're actively trading. So anyhow, that's an overview of the sort of stuff that I do, and I hope that this video has been useful for you.